Hello and welcome back to another Warcraft video. This one is going to be another controversial discussion topic kind of thing. So, they have confirmed that level 90 boosts are going to be a thing, and not only just in Warlords of Draenor, but also in the in-game store and the Blizzard store. Warlords itself will be up for pre-order quite soon, and the digital versions will come with a free boost. They said they had announced plans for the Collector's Edition, the physical Collector's Edition, later on. They also confirmed that they will see level 90 boosts on the store, and they didn't talk about any restrictions. This is definitely one of the touchiest topics in quite a long time actually, so do be civil to each other in the comments, because sometimes when these videos come out and there's actual intelligent debate, it's drowned out by people being complete idiots, so don't be an idiot. Anyway, I'm going to look at the positive aspects and then the negative aspects, because there are plenty of both, as well as just looking at some fundamental game design issues that it presents. Then finally, I'm going to actually go through some of Bashiok's responses, and just say how I don't really feel that a lot of what he said holds much water, and they would have been better getting a game designer to respond to this rather than a community manager, because I just don't think he really gave the argument justice. Anyway, so first of all, I do not like the idea of boosting characters as someone who's coming from a game design perspective, but I can live with it as long as you already have to have a level 90 in order to boost a character. Many of my later points are going to be aimed at the idea of new players being able to boost, and as always I think people will say that it doesn't affect me, so it's fine, and I'm going to cover that viewpoint in a bit. And one thing that's also worth saying is that a lot of people are probably going to think, oh well, we're not sure if new players will be able to use the 90 boost. Based on what Bashiok has said on both his Twitter and the main thread in the US forums, that's not the case, and you will be able to boost a fresh character on a fresh account that's never played World of Warcraft before. Anyway, time for the pluses and minuses. Let's start off with the positive. So, the big plus, initially, is that if you're getting back into Warlords of Draenor, it's going to be really easy for existing players. And if you dropped out a while back, then you can get straight into the newest expansion. That's fantastic. Now, this boost is actually going to be applied to people's characters when they pre-order, not when the expansion launches. So that means that you will have a few month period in which you can basically jump in and get to play some World of Warcraft and prep for the expansion at max level. So that actually, you know what? It's kinda cool, and this whole idea of the level 90 coming with Warlords of Draenor is something that I have from the outset thought was a very positive thing. Now, from a business perspective as well, it's also going to be very good for pre-orders, and it's also going to be quite good for keeping sub numbers up during this kind of slump period, because people are going to get these level 90 boosts, they're going to want to apply them and use them, so they're more likely to subscribe to the game. That's definitely one aspect of it from a business perspective. Anyway, another thing about just boosts in general is it means that people can immediately start playing with friends. And that's good. People will stay in the game longer when they're with friends, and they'll probably have more fun when they're with friends. So that's fine. Next, also, leveling is not fun to many people, so skipping it would be good for them. I think that you should actually have to go through the leveling experience once, at least, because it's an element of the game, and I think that's something which you should be able to go through. But then if you decide, well, I don't really want to do that again, then you should be able to skip it. Everyone who is listening to this video now has went through leveling once, and I'd say a lot of you are probably okay with paying a bit of money to skip it. I guess that's fine, really, but I think that initial leveling experience does have a lot of value, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, for the positives, I think that you can more easily find and fulfill a needed role within endgame content. So say your raid needs a tank or a healer, well, you can quickly just boost up a new one. I don't know, does that make characters too throwaway? I suppose it kinda does, but I suppose it is of some use to that section of the community. Anyway, let's hop over to the other side of the coin. Now, one of the biggest arguments is the whole idea of whether it's pay to win, is it buying power? Well, okay, technically, yes, technically. Though in many respects, it's power that doesn't matter because you're still 10 levels behind maximum. So, still though, if a level 90 character is more powerful than a level 40, and you can get to level 90 instantly from level 40, then you are, objectively speaking, buying a lump of power. Many free-to-play games don't sell characters in this manner, and instead they sell an XP boost. This gives an acceleration, but I don't really think it can be directly considered as buying power. Accelerated access to power and just flat out buying it are kind of different things, and this is flat out buying it no matter what way you look at it. I suppose it is just mitigated by the fact that you cannot buy a max level character, and therefore it doesn't matter that much. It really doesn't. Anyway, so what about power that actually does matter? Because who cares about level 90s? Well, first of all, there is one advantage: you get easier access to multiple professions. This is an advantage since characters can only have 2 professions. If you want to corner an area of the market in the AH, or you just want the various benefits that multiple professions entails, then you'll be able to easily access, or have easier access to that via purchasing a second level 90. Even if there are things that are limited to level 100 characters only, then you still have faster access to that. So it is basically buying a little bit of power. Once again though, it's not power that really affects the vast majority of people. Then also, and this is the one that does concern me a little bit actually, you have faster access to additional garrisons. Now garrisons do come with gear, they come with currency rewards. We don't know exactly, but we know they come with a wide range of different rewards. So having faster access to this in multiple characters could actually present a little bit of a power issue. Someone going around with 10 garrisons is probably going to have some sort of advantage on someone that's going around with 1 garrison. Now they are of course 2 very extreme examples, but I just chose those to illustrate the point. It will of course be true to a lesser degree if someone only buys 1 or 2 characters. Still though, in terms of raw in-game power, I think that's really about it, and I'm not really convinced that the whole buying power argument is necessarily the biggest negative to this whole idea, though I suppose there is a slippery slope argument to be made somewhere in here, and the thing with the slippery slope argument is that it's an argument that if executed well, and is completely free of logical fallacies and is very eloquently presented, then it's a very successful and potent argument to make. But it's the kind of argument that if you even slip up in the smallest way, it falls completely flat on its face. So I'm not really going to make it, but I am going to reference the idea later on in another point. Anyway, so most of the following points that I'm going to make apply only if this is going to be available to new players who don't already have a level 90, and based on what Bashioka said, this is the case. So, much of this is going to be about leveling, and I do have a 41-minute long video which offers multiple different solutions to leveling, and honestly, it's essentially how to fix the current leveling issues via game design. If they implemented them, they would work. Different combinations of the 5 or 6 different options that I put forward would work in a way that wouldn't fuck people over. It would give an accelerated leveling experience that doesn't have diminished gameplay. So, go watch that if you are interested in the topic of leveling, I suppose. And honestly, fixing a game by game design, in my opinion, from just the perspective of being a respectable and ethical game company, you should always try to fix your problems by game design rather than by business, by just skipping the content. It's very lazy. And there's also a conflict of interest there, which I'll talk about in a minute. Anyway, so let's talk about leveling itself. Leveling is not the best bit of the game, but it still does serve a purpose. Players gain new abilities and talents over a period of time. This gives them a puzzle, essentially, of ever-increasing size, with the goal being to find a decent priority system or rotation, but basically just, they have a few different abilities, they're a bit of a puzzle, they work out how to use them, the puzzle is temporarily solved. This puzzle starts off easy because you only start off with a few different abilities, but it's built upon slowly and slowly, meaning that players do learn a basic rotation that works for them. I think the Monk was actually a fantastic example of this, where you got your, was it Tiger Palm, then you got the Sweeping Kick, and then they actually made sense together, and then they started adding on more abilities, but it all made sense, and by the time I hit level 32, with basically looking at 0 Monk guides, I knew pretty much how to play a monk, and it made sense, and I was really happy with how I was just learning that class on my own accord. That was cool. And while players may not, just come up with the most mathematically perfect one, what they will come up with is probably going to be okay, and it will work. The key thing, though, is that they actually get that positive feedback from the game where their decisions and their choices and what abilities to use, and that learning process all just feeds into their own success. That's very important from a game design perspective, and it's just a sort of a key thing that would be lost here. With a boost, pretty much these people would get all the pieces of the puzzle nearly at once. They'll be thrown into a Death Knight style starter zone at level 90, which will unlock abilities over the course of that zone. That's fine, but you're getting all these different pieces of the puzzle nearly at once. Now, this is something that you never, ever, ever want to happen. It's just bad game design. If you give people all the options, all the things at once, they get overwhelmed, there's too much kind of mechanical noise to the whole thing, and they just want to stick their head in the sand. Now, if a boost is available to people with level 90s, then this negative is completely gone, much in the same way that a Death Knight could only be made if you had already had a level 55. So that's fine. Anyway, so another aspect is that as you go through the leveling experience, you see the world, right? You get to see the story, the world, the zones, the music, all these different aspects which make up World of Warcraft as a whole. And this is really, really important. The game is called World of Warcraft. By undermining the entire process which makes you experience the vast majority of the world, then you undermine basically the core idea of the game being this large world in which an RPG happens, right? And really just undermining the existence of the majority of the world is just a bad idea. First of all, there are story concerns. People will miss out on a lot of things which lead to them appreciating other aspects of the game. I think an excellent example is people who go into Warlords of Draenor without going through Outland are going to have a very different experience. They won't see Draenor in the context of what Outland not used to be, what Outland is. And this removes a whole form of appreciation that they would have had. They won't get to see how these stories of those zones evolve as we move into Outland. Another good example is I'm sure that the Horde people who knew Garrosh from Nagrand probably had a better time for it during Wrath, Cataclysm, and Mists of Pandaria because they knew where that character came from and they got to see the character development. Also, Blizzard said that when they are starting to make... Well, okay, so actually, I'll just go back a bit. A lot of the lore in the game started off from Warcraft 3, right? So Wrath of the Lich King, Burning Crusade. Like, Burning Crusade was essentially just killing off a bunch of Warcraft 3 plot ties and stuff. Now, as we go forward, they can't do that anymore, and Blizzard said that they want to start establishing more of World of Warcraft's lore within World of Warcraft via the zones and the stories and the quests and that kind of thing. Well, say they establish a bunch of fantastic character arcs in Warlords of Draenor that are going to be very relevant in the next expansion. Well, then, when we jump into the next expansion, right, and then people can use their level 100 boost, because that's what it would be called then, they would miss out on the Warlords of Draenor plot stuff, okay? So they would boost through it without seeing it. This completely changes how they would see the next expansion's content and characters. It would be a little bit like reading a book without seeing the first few chapters. That's just not how you read a book. Then it also undermines the feeling of reward that people get from setting a goal and then reaching it. When we put time into something, we just feel more attached to it, right? And that is why everyone remembers very vividly dinging their first character. I remember digging my first character. It was maybe 5-6 years ago. I was in Netherstorm, and I was really fucking happy. I can even tell you that I was drinking, I think it was Robinson's barley water, sugar-free. That is the drink that I was drinking at the time. I remember the taste of it. That is a moment that people remember. That's no longer going to be a thing. That really is kind of sad. And one of the reasons why you really remember this is because you put a lot of time and effort into that character. And what they're doing with this is that they swap time and money, but the key difference is that the time spent acquiring the money, right, isn't like game time, which leads to increased attachment with your character. This makes characters feel more expendable, and then just completely dime a dozen. Well, okay, probably not a dime a dozen, probably many dimes a dozen, but I mean, you catch my drift, right? Anyway, so let's move on to my next point. There's also a bit of an issue with how it makes players feel. So when leveling up a character, people are going to feel like it's all completely pointless, because with one simple button press, they can just get closer to the goal that they want, and where they want their character to be. Now, even if someone likes leveling, or a certain zone or something like that, there's still going to be this prevalent feeling that's just kind of a thorn in your side. It's just this annoying little thing saying, hey, you know, all this time you're spending, it's worthless. You can just buy it. Okay, it's not worthless. It's obviously, now has a monetary value attached to it, which is a problem within itself. But it's essentially saying, you know, ha, you pleb, enjoy leveling because you are a freeloader. Well, you're not a freeloader. Well, you're like a freeloader that's already paying a subscription fee. What this does is it undermines the leveling experience for a lot of people who enjoy leveling. And the only way to really get rid of that feeling is to jam your fingers in your ears and go, la 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 la, it doesn't affect me. And as I'm going to cover in a bit, that's not really a reasonable way to go about things. So if they think that a part of the game is so bad that people would just prefer skipping it, then they clearly just need to tackle that problem via game design. They are game designers, it's a games company. Business is extremely important, but if the business is to the detriment, or just to, if business decisions mean the problems are not solved via game design, then it means that they're not really doing things right. Now, of course, from a business perspective, there are also some issues here. Instead of fixing this leveling experience, they're opting to essentially leverage the subpar leveling experience to make more money. This has got to be one of the most scummy ways of doing business. It's the sort of thing that often even free-to-play developers won't leverage in such a blatant way. There are a number of very easy tweaks, which you can see in my video, by the way, which would improve the leveling experience. These would cost a lot of, well, not a lot, they would cost a decent amount of developer time for Blizzard to implement, but they are making money from our subscription fees. Therefore, instead of getting our sub money, rolling it into putting additional microtransactions, which our sub money isn't really paying for, and then not fixing problems with the core game, they should just make a better game. You know, it doesn't seem that crazy to say it. Anyway, so, next thing, the whole idea of, it doesn't affect me, so it's fine. Firstly, slippery slope arguments are a thing. I'm not going to make one, but I think it's pretty damn obvious. Back in the day, Blizzard's approach to this sort of thing was very different in how it feels now, in comparison to how it is now. We even saw blue posts ages ago which basically said, no, we'll never sell anything to do with gameplay, ever, on the store. They were blue posts in the day from official Blizzard employees. Well, I'm sorry, but this does affect the game experience. It does affect gameplay. Back then, even in the TRH days, and that retarded horse meme from all the way back, they basically said, no, it's never going to affect gameplay, never going to be anything that affects that sort of thing. Well, it is. So, I suppose there is a little bit of a slope that's been slid down there, if you think about it. The levels of monetization in this game are increasing, and there's no real way that we can know this stops. Can you really trust a company which keeps on adding more and more and more levels of monetization into the game that often are really, well, in this case, are just skipping game design problems which the game has instead of actually fixing them? Is that trustworthy? Perhaps not so much. And perhaps this change doesn't affect you, and you don't plan on using it. That's cool. If you don't plan on using it, then don't bloody well use it. That's great. Honestly, I won't be buying multiple of these, because you kind of need to stick to your guns. But the thing is, how about the next change, or the one after that? Now you may think, well, come on, this is Blizzard. There's not going to be a next change that's maybe less acceptable than this level 90 boost. Well, if I had a time machine, and I could go back to the Sparkle Pony board meeting, and ask them what they thought of selling level 90 characters, I'd be very interested to hear what they think. Of course, I don't have a time machine, but the point is moot. Still though, it's an interesting mental exercise, and based on a lot of the blue posts of that era, it would certainly suggest that they had a different mantra to it than they do now. This also specifically could affect you, right? So if anyone can get a free boost, then there is a good chance that there will be more witless max level people running around whose experience of the game is only 10 levels, and those 10 levels were spent with more abilities than they could shake a stick at, and they were just very confused. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim this is going to be a massive problem. It likely won't be. These are people that, even if there were a ton of them, you could just ignore them. That's what I would do. So this is not going to be a ginormous issue, really. And then, of course, they are saying that since they can't stop people from doing character transfers with multiple copies of Warlords of Draenor, in order to buy level 90s, that they need to add it to the store. This is actually a similar argument to as to why they put the auction house into Diablo 3. They said that they can't stop people from trading items on eBay, so they need to add in this giant layer of monetization into the game. No. Anyway, so over Twitter, Danger Dolan suggested that perhaps they could make boosted characters account bound or something like that. That definitely is one way. But like they could just say somewhere really clear that this is not that buying multiple like characters or copies of the game and all that stuff, and then doing paid character transfers is not a way to buy level 90s. Just say it's impossible. They could do that, but it would seem kind of confusing to players, I suppose. Honestly, if I had to choose between this current setup and no boost at all, I'd choose no boost at all. I think it does get rather annoying how they've ramped up the amount of monetization above the subscription fee. Some of this stuff, like when they start affecting gameplay, it nearly does just feel like they're putting in these various grindy things into the game, and instead of fixing them via game design, they're just doing the free-to-play style thing and allowing you to pay to skip the bad content. There shouldn't be bad content, really. That's ideally how you make a subscription game. And I'm telling you, right, see, if I was there at WildStar or some other MMO, I would be leveraging the fuck out of this whole thing. I'd be saying, this is the a la carte experience. You pay us $8.99, that's in pounds by the way, a month, and you get everything with no additional gameplay, microtransactions, blah blah blah. That's what I'd be doing if I was in the marketing department of WildStar or ESO or something like that. Anyway, so that's essentially it. My own opinion is, I wish that this was something that was only available for people who already had max level characters. That way it would be just like the Death Knight boost that we had, and it would be fine. And then of course I do have all those different game design issues with the game, and I think a lot of people are probably going to comment in this video who don't come from that background. If you want to know my background, it's far more technical than just a game design thing. I mean, we have one game design module, but honestly, like, I've got 100% nearly everything in that module without spending a minute of extra work on it, because it just comes as common sense. That's not me trying to toot my own trumpet. Compare me to a med student, you know what? The med student's 1,000 times fucking smarter than me. But what's key there is that this is my thing, this is the thing I understand, and I like to think I'm kind of good at it. The little games that I've designed over the course of university, there's a few different, like just phone games and things like that, which aren't on any stores, but I probably will release them over the summer. They have all been really well received by people, including lecturers and other, like, just peers and stuff like that, and I've got very good marks for them. So I'm going to say that from a game design kind of thing, I generally do know my stuff, and I can speak with at least a little bit more authority, because a part of what I plan on doing with my life involves game design. I read up a lot about it, I've read a lot of academic stuff, and in general it's just one of those areas where, say you have a guy who's really interested in biology and therefore he reads all the biology papers, that, you know, the scientific journals and things like that. It's a little bit like that for me in game design and the kind of human psychology level of it. I think if any of you actually want to get a little bit more interested in game design, and perhaps you're not a game designer, but you find that whole element really interesting, then you should definitely go to, just go to YouTube, type in extra credits. That is one of the best little series of videos that there is. I mean, okay, maybe not everyone agrees on 100% of everything, but it's just fantastic, and personally it's what I watch while I'm on the treadmill. So yeah. Anyway, now it is time for the Bashiok Response Force. I don't have anything against this guy, actually. He's just pretty cool, and sometimes I like the way he's a little bit more blunt and actually just says things how they are. That's something that personally I really do appreciate a lot in people. But I think that Blizzard actually should have just brought a game designer in to defend this decision with actual design arguments, rather than just bring Bashiok in, because he did say a lot of things, but he didn't really back them up with really well-reasoned, design-based evidence, and when you're talking about something that is fundamentally core to the way a game feels, you should be backing up with design evidence. So anyway, in regards to pay to win, he said, ideally no one has ever hit the level cap of the last expansion, looked at their dungeon blues, and thought, I win. So do I think it's much of a win to hit the last expansion's level cap? No, not really, it's not much of a win, but I don't really think that this point of his is really correct. First of all, you're assuming that the only goal is endgame, right? There's a lot of people who enjoy leveling, and they don't want to see this experience completely undermined in all the various ways that I said above, right? So there's that. Then, of course, they have experienced content and seen the world, so they're not thinking, yes, I win, but they're at least thinking, oh, that was really cool. Maybe if they're one of those crazy people who enjoyed Oldham, or enjoyed some other random zone, they thought, I really enjoyed that zone. I'm glad I didn't skip through that. So yeah, there are actually a lot of positives, and when you hit the end, like, level cap of a previous expansion, you often think, well, shit, that's that done and dusted, I got to see what happened in that expansion, that was kinda cool. That's been completely lost. Then, of course, they also have all the different new abilities and talents, and they're introduced in a reasonably easy-to-learn pace, which means that by the time you hit the last level, or last expansion's level cap, at the kind of correct pacing without doing the boost, you will actually probably feel a little bit more in grasp of your character. So anyway, the next thing he said is, I can't think of any games I've purchased where I thought the first thing I would do is create a high-level character and skip the game I just got, even if that option was available to me. So first of all, he's making large assumptions with a broad stroke, and that is a terrible idea, especially for a community manager. That's what really confused me there. Now, people are going to do things like this. All the time while leveling, they are going to have this goal of max level in mind, because yeah, that's a completely reasonable goal to have. And even though they may be completely enjoying the leveling content that they're doing, they are still going to be nagged by the fact that there's a button with a feed that lets them get to their goal instantly. People like instant gratification, so they'd be very tempted to hit that button. I'm sure we are going to find people that end up with a little bit of buyer's remorse with this button. I am sure of it. This is kind of related to the whole buyer's remorse point, but you know, back in the day, right, when you were you were a kid, and it was still in the days when cheat codes were a thing and they weren't just rolled into DLC, and there was a game that you found hard, but you'd beat it with cheat codes, and then at the end you'd feel kind of empty and shitty. I'd be worried that that would happen with the level 90 boost, especially if it's on your first character. I really do think that it's just so core to a game like this, that your first character starts off being a level 1 newbie, and you get that progression all the way up to maximum level. I think that's just really important. Then, of course, we have another thing from Bashok. He said, and I quote, of course, also, if you are good at games, you're a gamer. You're going to get a handle on WoW mechanics and systems pretty quick, I think. Easy to learn but difficult to master is our motto. And if you're not good at games, I don't think a few days of leveling is going to transform you into a heroic raider. First of all, saying a few days of leveling transforming you into a heroic raider, no one was ever making that argument. So no one is ever going to claim that that will transform you into a heroic raider, but what it will hopefully do is via the slow reduction of, the slow addition of new abilities, it will kind of morph you into someone who is able to better understand new mechanics as they're presented to you in endgame. But anyway, let's get into my main point. So curves are very, very important in games. When leveling, you slowly get new abilities, and initially players have to work out how these spells should be used, and then come up with their own little priority system. It's a bit like a puzzle that evolves with the character, and there's a little bit of gratification to making intelligent choices within that puzzle and actually seeing positive rewards, in that you kill mobs faster and that sort of thing. So if you just boosted to level 90 and you get all your abilities within just an hour-long zone, then there's a bit of a problem. My level 90 hunter has about 64 abilities, minus 10 or so passives. Now, is Bashiok seriously telling me that giving players 54 usable pieces in a puzzle is going to be a good experience for new people, and that it's going to be easy to pick up, right? That Death Knight starter experience started off like that because people already had to have a character over level 55, and it only had an amount of abilities appropriate to level 55, not an amount appropriate to level 90. There are far more abilities at level 90 than there were at level 55. This is one of the reasons why I think this boost should only be for people who have already got to level 90, because they're the people who are probably going to have had this curve happen at least once, so they will understand a little bit more about how character progression works, what basic fundamentals of rotation are and that sort of thing. And yes, we all see lots of idiots, but, well, let's just move on to his next thing that he said. And I quote, "I know enough people that I know that them having leveled many level 90s has still not made them good at the game. And I also think that there is more to it than just leveling or not. Even if a brand new gamer chooses to boost to level 90 immediately, they're many weeks of content and experience away from where you are now, and that experience is going to be far and away more relevant than the challenge faced when leveling." Okay, he has good points, he has bad points. First of all, saying "I know enough people" is not the kind of evidence you should ever bring to a debate. You don't bring a bit of non-fact-based evidence and then try to build an argument around it. But anyway, it does just so happen that he does have some legit points, so let's just roll with it. His point is that plenty of people level to 90 and are still bad at the game, so he thinks that there is more than just leveling and skill. Well, of course, no one's ever claimed the contrary. The thing is, though, that those people who we talked about would be just completely terrified by 60 buttons being thrown at them within a very short period of time. Okay, leveling up may not make a great player, but it's certainly going to introduce the concepts of a game in what's called a difficulty curve instead of sticking them all in there in 1 hour. Too much choice at once confuses the hell out of people, and it would just lead to them bouncing off the game. That since they already paid for it, they nearly feel like they're kind of at ransom to keep on going through it. And right now, the leveling experience can be done semi-decently without a guide. With a level 90 boost where you're just presented with 60, 70 different abilities and buttons and things on your screen, then you kinda are gonna need a level 60 boost class guide, your quick start guide to success. Now, that's bad game design. You never want to push players out of your game. And I get that sometimes raids and things like that they kinda do push you out into looking at a guide. That's okay, but I think for the core elements like leveling, a guide should never be completely needed. Now, to his point of the experience of leveling not really being relevant to the challenge faced at endgame, sure, I'll give you that one. The challenges are not the same, but what is the same is the class mechanics that you're using. If you're a hunter, you're still going to be using that base kind of, I don't know, bestial, wrath, kill command, whatever, fucking rotation. You're still going to be using that while you're leveling up, and you're still going to be using that while you're raiding. So even in terms of just building up muscle memory and understanding your abilities and how they work together, they're going to be relevant. For leveling up some class, I don't know, like a hunter, the skill in having your pet tank things for you and misdirecting things to your pet so that you can more effectively grind up through levels. These are things that I was doing on my very first playthrough of this game. And look, I must have been like 13 or something. And honestly, I was shit. I didn't even know what tank healer DPS was. Yet I was still thinking, oh yeah, I can use this misdirect thing to get my, like, multiple things to attack my pet. Therefore, I can just sit in the back and be really happy with it. That was damn cool. And okay, that may not happen to a similar extent with a lot of people, but still, similar things like that are going to happen. Anyway, so next up, he said, how a character is boosted, including with the expansion or purchased, does not change someone's competency in playing with that character. Again, this is a point that's covered with what I previously said. The whole learning curve, getting abilities over time, blah 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 blah, and placing the player on top of this curve just completely defeats the purpose of there being the curve, and it's also against their idea of easy to learn, hard to master, because it initially makes it hard to learn. Also, you cannot assume that a new player will not want to just boost up from the start. For a new person, the leveling would just feel pointless when you can get through it instantly with a button click. So yeah, take that, Bashiok. Anyway, finally, just to round up our roast of some of the comments he made, on Twitter he said that the requirement of already having to have a level 90 or 100 was bad because, and here we go, I quote, there is an unrealistic ideal that somehow leveling will prove someone's worth or even make them a better gamer. First of all, leveling, learning curve, then having a cohesive game experience for all players, then da fuck lore. You know, give him some grounding in this world, then the whole fact of skipping the World of Warcraft takes away so much lore, context, and grounding that the game has, that it's just going to take away a lot of quality. It's the kind of thing where you might not be able to point your finger at it, but there will definitely be a feeling of something not being quite right. Anyway, that's it for this video. Goddamn, I was aiming for 10 minutes, but there's just so much to talk about. And I know that when I went through Bashiok's points there, I did end up repeating one or two things, but I just think that it was definitely important to not call him out, because I'm not really calling him out. Well, I guess kind of technically am, but I think a lot of people are going to read his comments, and I just think that it's very important that somebody who has a little bit more of a voice than just a random forum poster gets to respond to those. So I actually think that was kind of important, and if you were kind of miffed by the fact that I did have to go over one or 2 points, then sorry, that's just a necessary evil, I guess. Anyway, this is probably going to be a video that's going to be full of angry comments and people trying to tell me to kill myself and dislikes and all that fun stuff, but whatever. And it's also worth saying that people are probably going to say, oh, you don't really like Blizzard, blah blah blah. No, I love World of Warcraft. I am a fan of Blizzard's work. The thing is, though, I think being a fan, the original meaning of fan was just a shortening for fanatic. Being a fanatic is never good. I think the proper modern use of fan is just someone who really appreciates someone else's work. And a part of appreciating someone else's work is being there to say, yes, this is good, no, that's bad, and actually be intellectual about it, instead of being a Total Biscuit style fanboy. That's not me calling Total Biscuit a fanboy, I just mean he was kind of instrumental in kind of coming up with the entire idea of having legions of idiotic fanboys. So, yeah, plus 10 points to you, Blizzard, plus 10 points to you, Total Biscuit. And with that crazy point drop bombshell, I'm gonna go, because my brain's kind of bamboozled. See ya.